When I was mentally ill, I really thought I was gonna die. And it wasn't even like a physical death, like I was dying inside. And just the will to survive, and that I can have, you want a normal life so bad, but it just seems like no matter what you do, you can never be normal. And I just wanted to have a normal life. When I was 14 or 15, I started becoming really obsessed with my physical fitness and martial arts and stuff, and I practice martial arts, Wing Chun, at least 6 to 8 hours a day. I was just obsessed. I was obsessed with Bruce Lee at the time, and it was almost like I worked myself into mental illness. It was really scary, and I struggled with that, and I was on and off medication, and every time I went off my medication it would get worse. I stayed on the medication for a while, and it helped, and I decided to go off again because my physical health, my martial arts and stuff wasn't doing so well with the medication in my eyes at the time. And I ended up going completely psychotic and thinking I was God or Jesus, and I stole from a store, got arrested. I spent some time in forensics and had a whole range of delusions, thinking I might be a werewolf or the Antichrist, or it was just craziness. And I mean, me realizing that was the first step to true recovery. So here I am on good medication. I think it's good. I like it, so that's important.
The thing with spending time with Lucas, it was always some precious moments, because he really valued spending time together, and he really valued, some listening and some talking, and when he was on his medication, it was fairly what you would call normal, and there was times that he was off his medication and he would be talking about very fanciful or out there kind of things that would freak a lot of people out. But if you've had any experience or the young person, it's not so scary. The nice thing is we could bounce things off Glenn Barry, who's a psychologist, or Scott, and we could say to them, hey, should we encourage this? Should we discourage it? Should we just go with the flow? And they were able to coach us through a lot of that stuff when there was a struggle with mental health. And so that was really great. So yeah, he would love to get in the car and go for a drive, whether it was out to his mom's place, which was like 30 minutes away, or whether it was in town to grab a coffee. There was a number of people he could connect with and spend that time with, and that was really important to him.
I left the refuge after kicking Jacob, and I went to the marsh and I grabbed a stick, and I thought, at the time I thought I was infected with worms, so I tried to channel all the power from the negative energy from my body into the stick. And so I walked around town with a stick, and I thought I was taking negative energy from people and healing them. So I walked around town with the stick and tried to heal people. And I came back to the refuge because I wanted to heal Jacob after kicking him, and the police showed up and told me I couldn't come back there, and they said they were either going to take me up to the hospital or I had to leave. And I didn't want to go to the hospital, so I decided to go back to the marsh.
Yeah, and this is where we could come up and visit you until you're ready to come back to the refuge.
Yeah.
And Scott and Glenn were consistent through that time, because they could work with you here or at Valley Regional.
Yeah.
And also at the refuge, right?
Yeah, it was here when I actually came to the conclusion where I decided I couldn't smoke weed anymore.
Oh, that's where you realized it was not helping your situation.
Yeah, because I hadn't smoked any while I was in the hospital, and I recovered a bit. And I decided, I'll try a puff, and I had a couple puffs out back here with my buddy Ryan, who was also in the Beacon House, and it really freaked me out. Like I heard chainsaws and stuff, and I thought people were coming to kill me. So it's like, no, I'm not gonna smoke that anymore.
So, in your own understanding,
Yeah.
When you were using marijuana to help you, you thought it was actually hindering you. It was affecting your medication, affecting your mental health and things like that.
Yeah, I think I was too sick at the time before to realize that's what it was.
Yeah.
I thought the world was just changing. So.
Right.
When you're in there, they don't really tell you much about what's going to go on with your...
Right.
What they're planning to do with you. So you're kind of there wondering what's going on and what's going to happen, and then they make changes and you're not aware about it. They just come to you with a new medication. You're like, what's this? I don't want to take it, sort of thing, right?
So when Dr. Mulhall can explain things and why they're trying things that they're trying, or what the treatment might look like, that helps you.
Yeah, it did, yeah.
Oh my. He was a bit of a challenge. Let's put it that way. Yeah, when he was younger, he was diagnosed with ADHD. Before he moved out, it was just, there was like some things going on with him, with his psychosis and stuff, which I didn't really know much about. I do remember going out one time with some friends of mine. I come home, and here he is, like, boiling his clothes on top of the stove. He just felt like he had some issues where he felt like there was things in his clothes, like bugs or something, right? And the more I tried to tell him, like, no, they're okay, you're okay, but the more it wasn't okay for him. And it's like, for me, how do I go about trying to help him when I've never experienced anything like that before, right? And there wasn't a whole lot of information for me of how to deal with it, and it escalated, got to the point where you gotta go, because, I'm gonna lose it on the thing, right? It was just very hard for him and for me, right? It wasn't a decision that I made lightly by any means. I mean, they're your children, and you don't really want to do that. But sometimes it comes down to that. If you're in a situation where it could escalate and get a lot worse, but sometimes you have to just, let them go and try to figure things out. But, because when you're not totally understanding what he's going through mentally, it's just really different. So.
We work with mostly with people with more severe mental illnesses, so schizophrenia, psychosis, other kinds of thought disorder, and sometimes bipolar disorder as well, and some other major illnesses from time to time. But these tend to hit a person in their late teens or early adulthood and completely knocks them off of their life pathway. And it's a big deal. It's a big deal because we're talking about a brain disorder. But there's a lot we can do to help people improve and recover and get back on their life track. Medication is almost always involved, but that's not always an easy process, and so we're helping to make sure that that's working well for the person. Also, psychotherapy, sometimes for symptoms that still don't go away, sometimes anxiety and depression that need to be dealt with, as well as some of those other major illnesses. There's a lot of research on the connection between using substances and mental illness, and there's a strong connection. The thing is some people have a predisposition or vulnerability. They're going to develop an illness no matter what, and substances usually make that happen sooner than later. There are also some people that would not otherwise develop a mental illness, and drugs seem to trigger that somehow. Different kinds of substances will. Now, any one of us, if we use enough of one thing or another, we can develop symptoms of a major mental illness. Well, what I'm talking about is sometimes that will happen with people using substances, and then those symptoms will stay, and it will develop a disorder that has a life of its own. Anybody that has any kind of mental illness, the symptoms will get worse using substances as well. So it's quite a complicated connection, but there definitely is a strong one. So in the valley, we probably expect somewhere around 1% of people are going to develop a major illness like schizophrenia. 3 to 5% of people are going to develop a major illness like schizophrenia, another kind of psychosis, bipolar disorder. And probably 2 or 3 times that, a minimum, are going to develop a severe enough anxiety or depression that's going to interfere with their life. Ultimately, people who are isolated may not have a place to live. And I guess what I mean by that is not a stable place to live. So I'm not just talking about shelter, but I'm talking about some level of stability, connections with other people. If those things are missing and symptoms keep on persisting, there are a lot of people that either continue to get worse and worse. Some will die from suicide, and some will end up even in the criminal system or the justice system, where there's really no need for that to have happened.
So we're just probably a half a kilometer outside of the actual town of Kentville, even though it doesn't really look like it. So it's kind of, it might not be a warm shelter per se, but it's somewhere that people can find a place to sleep if they needed to find some shelter out of the wind or have a spot that they could call home for the night.
Yeah, you don't get a lot of sleep really when it's this cold or colder. You're tossing and turning, rolling around. You might get a collective hour of sleep throughout the night, and then you got to wake up the next day and try to go and stay afloat. You've been abandoned. At that point, you've been abandoned and nobody cares. So I remember wishing and praying and like making bargains. If you give me a warm spot to sleep, then I'd quit smoking or whatever, those kinds of things. I would think about it. I had no reason to move forward, to keep living, except my family, and not wanting my younger siblings to have to go through what I went through just in this brief period of my life.
I felt just a little bit lost and alone, wishing like I had a bit more family support at times. For me, I would rather not have to deal with the abuse at home that I was dealing with than to put myself in the situations that I had to be, even though it was sometimes life or death situations to get through the night. It was still my own area that I didn't have to be controlled by somebody else and yelled at or even physically abused.
Yeah, sometimes you choose it.
Yeah.
This is nicer.
Yeah.
So the portal was the only one for me that ever really did anything, and there were certain things in government that existed that were available that did help me, but I had no idea of them or how to access them or anything like that.
It's like they almost keep it not hidden per se, but like it's hard to access the support programs that they have unless
as a kid you need an adult support of some kind to open those doors for you. And so that's what the portal is really. It's an adult who can partner with a youth or be a support to a youth and open those doors or show them that they exist in the first place.
Mm-hmm. I think we need more people like Russ out there. There's not enough, and that's the problem with the world nowadays is people are too wrapped up in their own lives that they can't take a few minutes to ask somebody how they're doing or if they need help with anything. I live by the saying, you can't change yesterday, but you can make it better tomorrow, you know what I mean? So it's kind of just a hope for building something in the future, having a positive hopes for something better down the road.
So we have 46 youth that are experiencing homelessness. This is a bad thing for numerous reasons. One, that counts as an adverse childhood event. So those youth are automatically at risk of higher mental health problems long-term, higher physical health problems long-term. And we also know that being homeless is a high risk factor for sexual exploitation. YWCA in Halifax, they did a project in 2020. They interviewed 95 sex workers, and 68% of them said that when they got into the sex trade, they were under 18. So if you didn't know, it's illegal to buy sex from a minor. So all of those people, of that 68%, were having crimes committed against them. So of the 95 people that they interviewed, 65 of them said they started in the sex trade because they needed money. 32% of them said it was because they were homeless. And then another 27 said that at that time they were experiencing violence in their family homes. We partnered also to get some more specific data from what's called Nova Scotia Engage. So they did one of the largest quality of life studies actually in North America, and it was in Nova Scotia. So there's quality of life data for the whole province, but we asked them to kind of funnel down, what about the Annapolis Valley specifically? And so the demographics they were looking at were between 16 and 24-year-olds for our area, and 31% of them said that they were not satisfied with their sense of belonging in community. 43% responded that their mental health was bad. 66% said that they had a negative life experience in the last year because of their mental health issues. 37% said they were dissatisfied with their mental wellness. So that's concerning, because if there is this relational breakdown aspect of homelessness and poverty, it means that as a community, we're not really doing a good enough job to help everybody feel welcome here.
I don't know how much this just makes me seem old, but one thing that I certainly notice within the Valley, we don't have the same connections in community that we did once upon a time. I'll say decades ago. People are connected, but there's online connections. There isn't the same level of connection where, let's say, a neighbor or a friend just checks in, like in real life, checks in on somebody else to see how they're doing. In many ways, the digital world has been awesome to help us connect with people that are more remote, and we at least have some kind of a connection. But the level of community has gone down. And I think that's something that, you know, if you're a family member of someone who's going through one of these difficulties, it's critically important to be, you know, that support for that person. I'd like to emphasize, again, you know, how much this is a big deal and it can really interrupt a person's life. But there is tremendous hope and nowadays tremendous expectation that people will recover and move forward in life.
So we've often talked about wraparound support for youth. I thought it might be helpful to break that down a bit. Wraparound is really all of the support services coming together in one accord to serve and support youth. Tied to all of those services, or at the central part of all of those services, is a caring adult that's there for that young person on a regular basis. So wraparound means mental health and addiction support. It means working with probation or anyone around the justice system, community services, which is two different parts, income assistance, employment supports, and actually child welfare as well. And then in addition to that, the education piece. When all of those key departments, but also key parts of a youth's life are all working in unison, then we end up seeing the best outcomes for that youth. But like you'll hear myself say and others say, really at the root of that, and what's the most effective in terms of that, is that connection that can be made between the youth and that adult that is somehow tied to that support or service in the community. The greater the compassion and understanding and the more effective the care, the better the outcomes that the youth experiences. Trevor, you've told me a lot about your story. And you've told me about the challenges when you were young. Talk to me about that last year before you left home. What was it like? It's not about blaming anyone, but what was it like at home?
Personally, I suffered a lot with drugs and alcohol, and my father didn't want that in me, so our relationship started to veer off.
Right.
And
when you say veer off, do you mean like it went downhill?
yeah, it went downhill a lot because he wanted to see the best in me, and that wasn't the best in me.
Right.
When I left my dad's place, I just, all my stuff was out there on the doorstep ready for me to go, and I'll be honest, I did shed some tears when I seen all that and all the doors were locked, but I just went on my way, and my spot that I had to go where I knew there was food and stuff was Annapolis.
Right.
I had no money, but I needed food, so obviously I'd go in the stores, steal some food, and then be on with myself. But Annapolis was the spot I had to go because I knew there was food.
Some youth have told me, and some we've guessed and speculated, but the feeling of abandonment, the feeling of shame, the feeling of just being alone is pretty scary. And people wonder why kids get lured into moving drugs or being involved in crime or even breaking in and stealing something. Chances are, for a lot of them, it's because of desperation and need. And so that feeling of being alone can cause us to be vulnerable, can cause us to be exploited, can cause us to do things we wouldn't normally do.
I spent a lot of nights. There's some nights I'd sleep under picnic tables at the Miners Marsh, and other nights I'd be sleeping in banks, anywhere where there's at least a little bit of coverage from the weather. My sister knew a guy, and she messaged him, and he contacted me and asked about my situation, and he wanted me at Tim Hortons with one of his friends, Russell.
Yeah.
And it took a lot for me to build up the confidence to go and have a lot of trust issues, so I didn't know if it was something I could trust or not.
Yeah.
When I met them at Tim Hortons, made sure I got something to eat, and then took me up and I had a shower and gave me a bag full of toothbrushes and soaps and clothes, and so it got me back up on my feet.
Yeah.
When I got a place to stay and the income assistance to help me stay there, it was just around when school was starting back up, so it made it a little bit easier that I actually had a roof over my head and whatnot, so that I could go to school and come back and be dry and shower for the next day.
Right.
The biggest help was co-op.
Okay.
I'd find. And with co-op, they got me back in the spot that I was working through a program, Engage.
Yeah.
And just got me back into the field of mechanics. And that's basically what helped me graduate. Because I spent half the day at school and half the day doing mechanic work, which I love. And Dolores made it easy because she'd either just give me a phone call or something and ask me how things are going. And
Is it true that she didn't give up? She kept persisting and making sure you were able to...
Exactly, and as far as I know, I was one of the first. So it was hard for her.
Yeah.
So she didn't know what she was getting herself into, but she went away with it.
Yeah.
What we see when youth are involved in programs like Career Rising and they're suddenly able to enter the workforce and try something new for the first time, it provides them with an experience of things that they may never have thought about before when it comes to career choices. So suddenly they're thinking of post-secondary. Suddenly they're thinking of opportunities they may never have thought of before. So it's not uncommon for youth who have had these opportunities for summer jobs to then start talking to us about, now I want to go to NSCC. So we can have those discussions about ETW funding at that point, which is basically a youth who would qualify can continue to remain on assistance and receive full funding for them to attend NSCC. So that's a pretty sweet deal. I can remember one youth in particular. I remember the first time I met him. I actually really remember the top of his head more than anything, because he couldn't look me in the eye. And by the time he was no longer attached to income assistance, which was through high school, and then subsequent to that, he got a job, you could see the difference in his physical posture. Every part of him looked different. And it's an amazing thing to be able to witness that kind of growth. It's a real privilege, actually. And I really think that when it comes to youth, it's really all about empowering them. And we're really fortunate because our department is really stepping up with providing a lot of supports and services that do that very thing. When you have summer programs that allow youth to get a summer job, that's empowering if a youth has never had a job before. When you tell a youth that they may qualify for the department to cover the cost of their college fees, that's huge. That's empowering. And all of those things are what really can make a huge difference in their lives, because we need to be able to give them pockets of hope. And those are huge pockets of hope.
You know, sometimes people give government a bad rap. In this last couple of years, we've had such an excellent partnership with our funders, and most of the funders are government, but it's also grassroots from the community. So we just have to say thanks, and we have to acknowledge both the community's participation, but also government recognizing that they need to partner with community, and we see that on a regular basis. So we definitely want to give a heartfelt thanks to the folks with Department of Community Services, the Youth Development Initiative, also Employment Supports and Income Assistance, the Nova Scotia Housing and the Homelessness Initiative, and also Child Welfare, who also provides through prevention and early intervention the funding for the Youth Outreach Program. So you can see how there's many different parts, but when it all comes together and then translates to something that's really practical, that's what's going to make outcomes better for youth.
With the portal with you and everything, no matter what I did, I mean, I could steal from a store or, have my ups and downs with my addictions. But no matter what, you didn't see me any different. You still see me as the person I was. And you tried to help me overcome everything. So that's what we need more of.
Right.
Because when little kids go homeless, they don't understand that, they think everybody's against them. Mm-hmm. But if they have somebody that they can crutch on and doesn't think too much of what they do wrongly, but still try to help them go on the right path, and it helps them a lot.
Makes a difference.
A lot of people think my life sucks. If you used to take your life and if you could change it with anybody's in the world and you didn't get a pick, would you do it?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I'd tell you right now, I had a rough life, but I wouldn't change it.
When I think about the thread that runs through each of the stories you're hearing and that we've witnessed, is that feeling of belonging, that feeling of being loved. Because when you have that sense of belonging and you feel loved, you have the courage to face the pain and the trauma. And when you're facing the pain and the trauma and you understand more about why you do the things you do, it's a little easier to take responsibility for yourself. And that's what we've always worked on with us and our partners, that we would help youth to take responsibility in a context or a place of feeling belonging while dealing with their trauma or their pain. And all three need to happen at the same time, but it can take a long time.
Life right now it's stable, I think. Boring sometimes, but
Boring's good?
yeah, boring's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Better
and
than
you've had a stable place to live for what, 5-6 years now?
5 or 6 years, yeah. I recently got my GED. I dropped out of high school because of my mental illness, and I wasn't able to complete it. And it's funny, before I was mentally ill, I never did well academically, and then I wrote my GED a little while ago, and I got like 80s and 90s on it, so that was pretty cool.
Lucas and I get along better now than we ever have. It was just like a total turnaround, and it's like him and I have a really great relationship.
There's a point in life when you kind of see where you are now versus where you were, and then you reevaluate everything and think about it, and you say, do I just want to keep going down the wrong road, or do I want to go down the good road? I chose the good road.